According to gunviolencearchive.org, there have been 32,000 deaths related to firearms so far this year. Of these, 12.3 thousand were either homicidal or unintentional, and 19.8 were suicidal. As of 2018, the population of the United States is 327.2 million, and if we do some simple division, there's been 0.000978% of Americans killed by firearms so far this year. Weapon violence in the United States is a pandemic, and it affects all of us. However, through proper training and understanding, we can eliminate the fear and taboo aspect firearms bring into our lives and our culture, and properly respond to situations and lower the death toll. Since I was a child, I've handled guns. I've shot them. I've attended formal training, and as an adult, I've joined the military. I've shot them more. I've attended formal training classes on safety, functionality, teardown and reassembly, and proper storage. I can say that those classes have made me feel more safe in my environment and safe handling them, and more willing and able to handle them around my fellow Americans than any other way. If we look at the last 5 years of data in the US, we'll see there's a current trend of firearm-related deaths, which influence news reports. Now, those news reports directly influence our lives either positively or negatively. We can argue that if they promoted weapons training and experience, they would have a positive effect on the population. Let's take a closer look at the last 5 years of data and see what it's telling us. In the last 5 years, there has been consistently a higher amount of suicides than there have been malicious firearm killings or accidental killings. According to gunviolencearchive.org, in the last 5 years, there have been a maximum of 15.7 thousand accidental or malicious deaths to firearms, and a minimum of 12.4 thousand. Meanwhile, there have been a minimum of 21.4 thousand deaths, and a maximum of 23.8 thousand due to suicide with firearms. We can see there's a steady rise in the last 5 years overall in the death toll, with an apex in 2017. But we can also argue that the media coverage of debates on firearms, whenever there's a current election, has a large impact on those deaths. According to Reuters Institute 2019 Digital News Report, English news is updated weekly at a rate of 47%. Meanwhile, 90% of news is accessed digitally. This includes social networking platforms. GunViolenceArchive.org shows that 345 mass shootings so far this year have occurred, as well as 25 mass murders. If we look at the fact that 90% of news is accessed digitally through social networking sites, and say that news coverage of those 345 mass shootings and 25 mass murders have been covered and shown on those social networking sites, we can say seeing the news reports of that have affected our lives, our society, and the people that are reading those. The effect of the news articles on social media posts have on our population can be positive and negative on the American public. When I was in high school, my health teacher gave us a lecture, and it was specifically on suicide. But it was what on suicide has effectually on the community. The idea is that if someone commits suicide, there's another person in the world that's going to be inspired to commit suicide because of this person. It's called the Werther effect. And medicaldictionary.com, the free dictionary, defines the Werther effect as an increase in suicide rates that follow media coverage of suicides, reading about other suicides, or suicides linked to suicide of a friend or a family member. That means, once again, if I was to commit suicide and my best friend saw it, who was also suicidal, he has a chance of committing suicide at a higher percent than other people that are feeling suicidal and haven't heard about it. www.openaccessgovernment.org states in an article over the Werther effect that results of this study unmistakably indicate that the prevention of suicidal behavior by the media is possible. For example, by presenting a successful coping with crisis method. Other factors having suicide-preventing effects include the mentioning of professional help services or the publication of warning signals and backgrounds listed in the WHO guidelines. For those of you who don't know, WHO is the World Health Organization. Effect of mass shooting reports as a whole have an effect on us. According to James Mindell, in the role of media in the promoting of generalized imitation, shootings in the United States occur approximately every 12.5 days. So if one happens every 12.5 days and those news outlets are providing sources at a 47% update rate, someone is being influenced to commit a mass murder or a mass shooting, just like someone is being influenced to commit suicide when somebody else does. In that same article, they came up with an idea called the contagion effect, and it's similar to a copycat effect, which is the Werther effect, and it's been suggested that occurs in mass shootings. If we consider the effect that media has and could have through broadcasting solutions, there are positive outcomes besides the contagion effect that negatively impacts us. Media currently does news stories on how to respond to an active shooter or a mass murder crisis, but they don't offer solutions including weapons training and weapons handling. And if they did, it could potentially help us as a country. While the contagion effect has a negative effect on the American population, providing tools and solutions can help us. According to Mr. Yablon in his article on weapons training and handgun owners, he says that 61% of firearm owners in the United States have received formal training. That means 61% of firearm owners out of the ones that own have received training. But if we look at another statistic, of the 327 million people here, there is a 1.2 gun ratio to people. He also states that 14% of people living in households with firearms have received safety training. The United States has a right to bear arms, and according to the Constitution, we do. According to Mr. Ingram in an article on firearm ownership stated in 2017, which also happens to have the highest amount of related deaths due to firearms, there were 393 licensed gun owners in comparison to the 326 million residents of the United States. The Second Amendment right states a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment says it all. If we the people own weapons as the militia, we're executing our right to bear arms. So what about the necessity of security? Part of security as a nation comes from our ability to bear arms and be a proper militia when it's called on or needed. Therefore, it's a necessity of our security for our population and our nation, and by our Constitution, that we are trained as a people to understand firearms in all aspects from safety to function. The statistics show exactly what's going on. The news can both positively and negatively impact us, so it's time to learn properly what to do and how to respond when it comes to safety as a whole, and by as a whole I mean as a nation. By gaining the understanding of what a firearm is, how it operates, as a nation, we can lower the death toll and be able to respond to criminals as well as the mentally ill that are armed. As someone who's been to formal trainings, I can say that with minimal experience, even without a weapon, attending a course can give you a better sense of security and a better sense of relief than anything you can buy at a store. So go get training.